I'm Dr. Sarah Humphrey. I'm the clinical lead for older people's mental health and dementia for the Yorkshire and Humber Clinical Network. And I'd like to introduce and show you where to find the new appropriate prescribing of antipsychotic medication in dementia toolkit. This is the framework of our toolkit, which was published in September 22. Today, I'm going to just run through some basics around the toolkit and then run through the sections. Distress behaviour. It's very important that we reframe our minds from thinking about challenging behaviours, which is the way we perceive behaviours, to thinking about distress. And distress is a function that happens when the brain, for whatever reason, has difficulty processing information, be that changes of routine or physical reasons like pain, being unwell, hungry or tired, and then not being able to communicate those difficulties with other people. And that leads to outbursts, anxiety, anger, frustration, and distress behaviours. If we think of behaviours in that framework, I think that will help us to make sure that we only use antipsychotics when they're appropriate. When can antipsychotic drugs help? Drug trials have shown that risperidone has a small but significant beneficial effect on aggression and to a lesser extent psychosis for people with Alzheimer's, and these effects are seen when the drug is taken for a period of only 6 to 12 weeks. So it's a very, very narrow remit. Antipsychotic drugs do not help with other behavioural and psychological symptoms such as distress and anxiety during personal cares, restlessness, agitation, repetitive vocalizations and shouting, walking about or often called wandering, social withdrawal or changes in levels of inhibitions. So for example, saying or doing things that are inappropriate. These changes are likely to need a personalised non-drug approach. Which antipsychotics are used for people with dementia? And the first thing I'd like to say, by including this slide, I am not suggesting that we advocate their use. What I'm showing you is information about how they are licensed at the moment, not advocating their use. So there are only 2 drugs that are approved and licensed for use, risperidone and haloperidol. Risperidone is licensed for short-term treatment of aggression in Alzheimer's if the aggression poses a risk or the person has not responded to non-drug approaches. Haloperidol is licensed for persistent aggression and psychotic symptoms in moderate to severe Alzheimer's and in vascular dementia when non-pharmacological treatments have been ineffective or there is a risk of harm to self or others. So the remit is extremely narrow. Other antipsychotic drugs are prescribed so-called off-license, off-label, and this means that the doctor can prescribe them if they have a good reason to do so and provided they follow the rules set out by the General Medical Council. And when I say doctor there, I'm talking about all prescribing clinicians. The reason that the toolkit came into place was that we recognise that there are severe side effects to antipsychotics and that these risks outweigh any benefits. The risks include risk of death and stroke and sedation, worsening of other symptoms of dementia, Parkinsonism symptoms, shaking and unsteadiness, an increased risk of infections, falls, blood clots and ankle swelling. I haven't quantified the risks here, but just shown you the risks that we're talking about. There are tools that help quantify those within the toolkit. Another reason that the toolkit is published is that we have huge variation around the country, and that variation means that we could do better because some places are. And if we're outliers, you have to ask why. The national English average is sitting just under 10% at 9.68%. But you can see that the regions of the country are very different. and actually, and go from 11% down to just under 8. Not only do we have variations around the country, but we have variations within regions. And this is the Yorkshire and Humber region. Yorkshire and Humber and London clinical networks are the networks that have developed this toolkit. And you can see here, if you look at the West Yorkshire ICS, we've got rates in Leeds at 5.5% and a neighbouring ICS in Bradford at sitting over 15%. So there are variations within a very small geographical area. Why a toolkit? Because prescribing of medications, antipsychotics, is extremely complex. There is no one reason anywhere why a place has high antipsychotic prescribing. So what I can't tell you is one thing that you need to do to change it. What I have done and what we have done is try to bring all the tools together that we've found, evidence of best practice, together in one place, so that when you look at your place, you can then decide which tools are going to be the most appropriate. We've also included audit tools, which can help you understand what's happening at your place. I don't expect you to be able to see this fishbone diagram in any detail, but this was one area and how they looked at their antipsychotic prescribing. And what they found was loads of different reasons that it was happening. And that meant loads of different opportunities to change it. Places have different resources. They have different historical and local attitudes to prescribing. They have different community assets, different staffing models, different environments that people living with dementia live in. They've had different amounts of training, and they have different historical systems and processes. So actually the solution is going to be a myriad of different things that you're going to need to do at place. And that's where the toolkit comes in. We have divided the toolkit up into various sections to try and group things together so that you can find things easily. The first section really looks at how antipsychotics are used, information about risk, information about person-centered approaches and shared decision making. We've also looked at things like delirium and how the treatment of delirium may affect your antipsychotic prescribing, and we've tried to bring all the resources together. The second section really looks at what we know about the non-pharmacological alternatives. We've looked at what evidence there is out there, the different types of alternatives, and evidence to help you build business cases for planning of services. The third section very much is centred around prescribing or de-prescribing. Why you should de-prescribe, when should you de-prescribe? And I'm not going to apologise, but we've not only stuck to antipsychotics. What we've done is seen the older person in totality. Frailty and dementia often sit side by side, and actually there are further considerations than antipsychotics for de-prescribing. So we introduce here anticholinergic burdens and the stop tool for frailty. So you can see actually when de-prescribing takes place that it should be holistically done and takes into scope all these other tools out there. And we've also looked at approaches that people have taken to help de-prescribing, because we're very happy to prescribe. We find it much more psychologically difficult to de-prescribe. The fourth section has brought together all of the tools. And what we've done here is we've tried to code the tools to who they're mostly appropriate for. So there may be some that are aimed for people living with dementia and their carers, others aimed at, say, primary care or secondary care, and some of them are appropriate for everybody. These are what we've found and we've been sent. It will never cover everything, and there may be better, newer tools out there, and we welcome the addition of those in future tool sets. We try to cover not only clinical things like the deprescribing toolkit, but other general resources like audit data and how you might audit things, how to find information about your place. How do you know where you're at as a place in the prescribing of antipsychotics? So a whole lot of general sources of data are all colour-coded in that last section. So that's the end of my brief introduction. There will be, hopefully, another iteration of the toolkit in 12 months. I think things can only get better. That will allow people to try out things, find resources that work, but also people may introduce their own resources. The way the toolkit works is that you can't pick one resource from this and say that's what I'm going to do at my place, because it'll depend what the problem is at your place. But if you develop new guidelines that you want to share with others, then we would love to see them. So on this page, you see an email address for the England team, and you can email any resources that you would like us to consider for the use in 12 months' time. You can see a link to the PDF version, which is held on the London Clinical Network site, and also there is a QR code to access the toolkit, should you want to share this in a slide set going forward. I think that covers everything. Thank you for listening, and I do hope you find it useful.